Hello, and welcome to episode 155 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devin Dundee. I'm joined by my co-host, Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, I want to start this week with just a little bit of appreciation for our listeners. We have an incredible group of listeners, very passionate about the things that we talk about. And based on our episode last week, we got quite a bit of feedback, things that our listeners wanted to share with us and wanted us to respond to. Should we start with our discussion about the skip intro button?
I think so, because this is probably the most passionate that I've ever seen from our listener base, right? And people on social media with regard to our conversation that I kind of expanded to social media as well. There seems to be a bit of a divide here. I'm happy to say that the divide is mostly on my side when it comes to skipping intros and not skipping intros. Now, family members told me after listening to the podcast that they also skip the intros, very much like yourself, where, you might watch the first episode and you see the intro and then you skip it. But a lot of the listeners to this podcast that are, very much film aficionados and TV series aficionados, very much on the purist side, like me, where they feel that, for maybe like the first 20 seconds going into a TV show, we can acknowledge the people that make the show, considering we're also prompted to skip the credits at the end of the show. So lots and lots of people also annoyed by the skip intro button and not having an option to be able to disable the button. But there were some people that agreed with you, Devin, as I mentioned at the top. That said, there was one bit of feedback which made me giggle because it was something I thought and I didn't vocalize last week. And this feedback comes from Sarah Hughes, I think, who asks, Devin, do you always throw your wife under the bus when presenting bad or controversial takes?
It's a fair question, so let me just come out and say it. I am fully responsible for my bad takes. When I choose to be wrong, I should own it and not hedge. So I take the criticism, very fair, and I'll just say it's my fault that I have the wrong take on skip intros. And I appreciate the feedback.
I don't think it's the wrong take. It's just not the one that I agree with. That said, great to get that kind of feedback, even if it is a little bit, poking in jest. And talking of feedback, I want to talk about low frequency feedback. Because this past week, I added to my home cinema, I have now 2 subwoofers, the KEF Cube 12 MIE. MIE standing for Music Intelligence something. Hold on. Music Integrity Engine. I'm very, very happy with these subwoofers. However, what I'm not doing is I'm not blowing the house up and annoying the neighbours. I've got a nice low level, but low frequency that is consistent throughout the room, and it's something I've been missing, Devin, probably since I moved away from the HomePods. If there is one thing about the HomePods, the big HomePods, it is that they're built in a certain way where it's really your all-in-one speaker, right? It's doing a fantastic job with the directional sound, but also I think it does a really good job for bass. Given that it is the 2-year anniversary, I can't believe it's been this long, Devin, since the HomePod was reintroduced with a second generation. And we got a question from Nick Love, who asks, why doesn't Apple offer a subwoofer for HomePod like Sonos do? And I think I may have given an answer in the intro to that question, Devin. You are a daily HomePod user for your home cinema. Did you have any extra thoughts on this? And are you a little bit disappointed that there aren't additions and tuning? And I don't know, the HomePod line hasn't expanded a little bit?
I've been the HomePod user with my Apple TV since before it was like officially supported. back when you could just set it as the AirPlay output for your Apple TV, and you had to do it, I think, manually every time I turned the Apple TV on because it would disconnect. And so I'm a huge fan of the home theater mode with the HomePods and the Apple TV 4K. I'm still rocking my 2 first-gen HomePods, and they're still doing great. But I personally, for my setup, I think they offer plenty of oomph for what I'm doing. You know, I've been impressed in certain moments with the bass output of those HomePods for their size. And I'm kind of in a place in my life now where I don't need the bass as much because, you know, I have a child in the house and you don't want to be blowing it out. But personally, I think Apple's approach to things is always to go as simple as possible. And so when you're talking about home theater, those are setups that can get very technical and in the weeds, which is great. I mean, it's awesome that those things are offered and that a company like Sonos, who has such a broad appeal, has gone into that world and really pushed what regular people who aren't super into it can do with their setups. But Apple just, I think they take things even simpler than that. And for people like me who are just looking for something really clean and easy, I think the dual HomePod setup really is the way to go. If Apple did offer a subwoofer, I'd probably try it, but it would introduce a level of technical complication and just like physical complication in terms of placing it and getting the setup just right, that I think that for people who really are drawn to that HomePod approach, they probably aren't looking to add that kind of complication. So Apple's just going very simple, very broad, keeping it super clean. And then that leaves space for companies like Sonos to fill that gap, I think. So personally, I'm not looking for an Apple HomePod subwoofer. I understand the desire for it, but I think that that's a place that's pretty well filled by companies like Sonos. And then, of course, you go into the high-end home theater wired stuff like you're exploring with your setup, which sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I will mention these Kef subwoofers. I'm actually using a wireless system.
Oh, wow.
For them both. And they've worked really, really well. I think there's like 15 milliseconds of lag, which you don't notice at all. They're incredible. I do kind of wish that there was still a little bit of an in-between from what you get with HomePods to Sonos, just in the sense of like having the ability to tune the HomePod a little bit more to your liking. Something came up actually. The last thing that I watched with an Apple TV connected with HomePods was the Wicked movie. I don't know. It didn't have the same kind of reproduction as when I saw it in the theatre. It didn't have that brassiness that you would get from a live stage show that I experienced in the cinema. I'm not sure if it's a mixed thing or if it was the HomePods in particular. So I guess that means another rewatch of that film, Devon.
Oh, what a shame. I mean, I can't get enough Wicked, so I think that's great, and I'm excited to hear what you think of it with the full subwoofer setup. I think that's going to be awesome. But a great question from Nick. Awesome feedback from our listeners this week. We always appreciate hearing from you. If we ever talk about a subject that resonates with you and you want to share your thoughts, we are always open to hearing it and might even respond on the show like we did just now. On to this week's episode. We're going to cover the return of MLS Season Pass with some intriguing changes. We're going to get Sigmund's thoughts on Deaf President Now after its festival debut and the premiere of new immersive film Man vs. Beast. But we're going to start with our highlight of Apple Original Spanish language dramedy, Love You to Death.
Following his heart cancer diagnosis, cautious Raul reconnects with free-spirited and newly pregnant Marta. They resume a friendship that began in childhood and, in a relationship brought together by fate, begin to test their beliefs about love.
¿Tengo cáncer?
Esto lo vamos a pasar juntos.
Que no me hacen quimio.
La he liado de locos.
¿Estás embarazada?
Mi vida no es como esperaba que sería a estas alturas.
El amor lo puedes encontrar en cualquier esquina. Llevas toda la vida zurrándote películas románticas. Tienes la posibilidad y vas a dejarla escapar.
Tienes que asustar al próximo que pase.
¿Qué haces? ¿Qué haces?
¡Es un fuego!
Created and directed by Danny De La Orden and starring Veronica Echegay and Juan Aramagos, We are about to find out whether Marta can fall in love and whether Raul will meet the love of his life. Give us an introduction to this really fun and I'd say darkly comedic Spanish language dramedy.
This is like an alternate universe Platonic almost. It's these people who knew each other when they were young and end up reconnecting, and it drastically changes their lives. Now, this is obviously a very different direction for that premise, but I think if you're drawn in by that idea, I think this is going to be for you. It follows two main characters, of course, Raul, who is this guy who's very quiet, and careful, and passive. He doesn't take a lot of risks or change up his routine much, but of course, in the first episode, his world is suddenly rocked by this terrifying diagnosis that takes place in the show's first 5 minutes. That storyline moved very quickly. It went immediately from, I don't feel great, to, you have heart cancer. That was kind of jarring, but I guess that gives us the experience of what Raul's getting here too, to see just how quickly his life changes. And in the midst of everything that's going on, he runs into Marta, who's a fun-loving, free-spirited, and creative person. She's not looking to be tied down by a relationship or even a traditional work environment, which it's very funny to see her relationship with her boss in this first episode. But she finds out that she's pregnant, and like Raul, she doesn't want to share her secret with others. So we really see these two people with wildly different personalities who are undergoing huge life changes, but they reconnect at a funeral and strike up a romance that neither of them saw coming. So it's a really interesting premise, I think, for a series about love and, can you fall in love in the midst of all these circumstances? What does that look like? I think reading the premise on paper, it almost sounds outlandish, but then you see it on screen and it actually is pretty real. These are things that people go through and not something that everyone's going to go through every day, but I think we all have experiences in life where it can feel really overwhelming. There's all these things changing, and sometimes that's when people enter your life that you don't expect, and it makes for some really interesting interactions and maybe even some comedic ones.
Yeah, and, this is going down the romance trope, whereas Platonic was very much the platonic friendship of two friends rekindling their relationship. What I love about these two characters are how opposite they are. You hear the phrase opposites attract. And you have Marta, who's very outgoing. She is supposedly working at an advertising firm, but shows up for about 2 seconds before she goes on her next binge. And then you've got Raul, who, we're introduced as he's getting his diagnosis by the doctor, who is incredibly blunt, and that's something I've experienced myself, so I did laugh quite a bit there. Well, she's very outgoing, and she's very much a person that pleases herself and her inhibitions. Raul's a people pleaser to a degree that basically sees the end of his relationship right at the beginning of the first episode, which, honestly, is quite a spiralling moment whilst they're out shopping for plants, and a really interesting interaction with the person that jumps in the queue in front of them. And I'm very much a people pleaser, Devon, so I felt a rapport with Raul, and I felt for him as well, because I've been in a similar situation before. Do you think you're more of a Raul or a Marta kind of person?
I am definitely more of a Raul. I like to make people happy. I'd say I'm probably less passive than him, at least I hope so, because he's just someone who can't seem to make any kind of decision for himself. But yeah, watching Marta's way of life stressed me out a ton. I could not live my life that way. Definitely not.
Now, we've seen many foreign language comedies. We've seen many Spanish language Apple originals over the last 12 months, especially. This was a little bit different for me, just because I think there is a bit of a difference in the pace between the Mexican Spanish that we're used to and the traditional Spanish, the best way I can put it, Spanish, that is present in this series. And it does fly by at quite a pace. And maybe that is the first episode, because admittedly, I had not yet got to the second episode. I'm saving that for tonight after this podcast. I'm not too sure how I'm going to go about watching the remainder of the series, but I was surprised in comparison to Where's Wonder, the German comedy adventure series that we covered at the end of last year, that the comedy in this I felt was more universal, and I would say the comedy doesn't get lost in translation, where I thought maybe some of it did in Where's Wonder. And I would say very, very dark, to a degree that I felt like it was more in line with what you would expect from a British comedy than an American comedy. Does it sometimes go too far?
It goes to the line, right? I mean, it's a show about a guy who has cancer. There's lots of jokes about cancer, what you're going to call it. And even in the trailer, we saw, his friend shaving his head in solidarity, which was hilarious because he's not getting chemo, right? That cracked me up even seeing it again in the show. But then there's lots of jokes about pregnancy and childbirth and motherhood as well, because that's the alternate storyline that's going on with Marta. And I mean, that's a whole plethora of jokes as well. And you can go down the range from very lighthearted and jokey to, pretty crude, and they kind of go the whole gamut. So yeah, there were moments I was cracking up. There were moments I was cringing, but I also, I have less of an appetite for some of that kind of humor than maybe other people do. So yeah, there's no line crossing here. It is a very funny show, but it's a slightly different, I'd say off kilter kind of humor from what I'm used to. But it's good to have shows for different kinds of humor appealing to different types of people. And I think this is one that's going to appeal to a lot of people. It's an interesting premise. It's got a good angle, good comedy, and one that I'm really excited to see play out.
And then, of course, you've got an expanded cast of family and friends that are both helping and hindering both Raul and Marta along the way. Yeah, I think this is going to be a blast. 8 episodes, beginning with its global premiere today on Apple TV+. Love You to Death. Great title as well.
Yeah, it's an excellent title in English. Great title in Spanish as well, A Muerte. A little shorter, but I like that one. And I kind of like the way they can blend the marketing of those two languages when they're putting these shows out there. You get the title card with the original title, but also it's in a language that we can understand as English speakers. So I think it's great. But speaking of English, Spanish, bilingual series that you're watching in a language that isn't your original language, some people have different approaches to that. Some people watch it with subtitles. Some people watch it dubbed. You got to mix and the match. And there are times when even people within the same household or who are watching together might want to take different approaches to that. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity, as we're gearing up for another Spanish language series on Apple TV+, to share some ideas for how you might be able to handle bilingual viewing with other people. So Sigmund, you've tried a bunch of different approaches to this. Do you want to share what you've tried and what you think works best?
Yeah, I think, a few years ago with the introduction of SharePlay, we came across by accident a way of being able to basically have bilingual playback, but you need lots of iOS devices for every person. You need to have a subscription that everyone has for Apple TV Plus, and you need AirPods as well, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot in the mix, along with bandwidth. Everything has to be connected. It's all got to be the same region. What I'm hoping is one day, and I'm hoping that day is, in the summer during WWDC, where we move from having just 2 sets of AirPods that can connect and listen to the same thing in Dolby Atmos to being able to listen to individual sound preferences, right? Different soundtracks. So maybe someone needs audio description, right? We've talked about this a fair few times, but for now, at least, there is a way, and that is via SharePlay. All it is really is you invite your family member to SharePlay. You're all still watching the main screen, but you'll have playback on an iOS device in the room that is synced up. And whilst your family member may be looking at the screen, the audio is actually coming from the iOS device, which is synced up for SharePlay. And that's just a way in which everyone can still enjoy together. I think I may have even mentioned it either on this show or on my guest appearance on Mac Power Users last year. But with this SharePlay method, you can get a multitude of different languages, and you can connect people that don't necessarily share the same language, but through the entertainment that they're watching in unison, which I just think is a beautiful thing. So that's what we can do in terms of bilingual audio. But the other thing I wanted to mention, seeing as audio heavy as the beginning of this episode has been, I wanted to talk about some methods in which someone maybe that's hard of hearing can listen with their headphones whilst everyone else in the room is watching and listening through the speakers on the television or sound system. And there are two ways to do this, I think fairly easily. The first is if you do have an AV receiver and you're, rocking a wired system. A lot of AV receivers now have multiple zones. So I know like some, for example, will have speakers in the garden, and that'll be zone 2. Well, during the winter months at least, what you can do is you can switch zone 2 to outputting to a pair of headphones, and so the person who's hard of hearing can still listen whilst everyone else is watching through the TV.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion for people who do have an audio receiver like yourself. It's a great use of that tech to make your setup more accessible, which is something that we always applaud. But what about for people like me who don't have an audio receiver, who have a more simplified audio setup? Is there a way that I could do something similar to this?
There isn't officially, but there is a way that you can by introducing a few things, right? So it's by no means the cheapest setup for something so simple. And so we do hope that this comes software-wise at some point from Apple directly. But if you've got an iPad with USB-C and you have a video capture card that is UVC compliant, meaning that that signal from the capture card can be displayed on an iPad through various apps which we'll have linked in the show notes, you'll need a video capture card with UVC and HDMI pass-through that can then be read by iPadOS, and you'll need a HDMI splitter as well as Bluetooth headphones and 3 HDMI cables. In this part of our conversation, I'm going to put a little diagram in the artwork so you can follow along. But it is pretty easy once it's set up. And the nice thing about it is it means that you're not having to kind of go down the SharePlay route. Obviously, it's limited in the sense that you can only have the same audio that's coming through the main speakers. But if that's all you're after, then that, I think, is super, super helpful. What I hope is that maybe with iPadOS, we get the ability to have the iPad as an audio out as well, very much like Macs can do. So that's what I'm hoping for, that at least for now, until Apple do offer these options and simplify the process. If you've ever wanted to, as I say, do bilingual audio or just have audio go to someone that is hard of hearing whilst everyone else is enjoying the show and so they don't feel left out, there are ways, and at least we've listed them here for you, and hopefully it makes some sense. Does it make sense to you, Devon?
I think it does. So you've got SharePlay as an option, you've got your AV receiver as an option, or if you need to, you can also split the HDMI signal off your Apple TV between your TV and an iPad that can connect wirelessly to someone's headphones. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, that's right. Those are 3 good options, kind of putting together the pieces of what Apple and other tech companies are offering to make them work for you and your loved ones who might need a little extra help hearing, which is totally fair. We want to make sure that everyone gets to enjoy what we're watching together, because those magic rays of light coming off your screen, they're not just for you. Anything we can do to make the experience more communal and something everyone can be a part of, we're always going to highly encourage.
Now, one reason that I would want to do this is, say I'm watching the football and someone wants to watch with the Spanish commentary, or maybe their team's commentary, and someone else wants to watch with their team's commentary. That would be very, very cool. That isn't an option just yet for sports viewing on Apple TV+, but the return of MLS Season Pass is bringing quite a lot of new with it. Where do we want to start? Because there's so much to unpack with these announcements from Major League Soccer and Apple TV this week.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Let's start with the fact that MLS Season Pass is back for its third season to kick off Major League Soccer's 30th year on February 22nd. And the first big addition we're going to talk about this season is called Sunday Night Soccer, a new primetime game slot featuring the league's most compelling matchups with enhanced production and dedicated studio programming, and also the fact that Sunday Night Soccer will be free for Apple TV Plus subscribers. This is a very interesting move. I believe in the past, MLS games have usually been on like Wednesdays and Saturdays, has been kind of how they program it. But now they're taking the game of the week that they think is going to get the most eyeballs, and they're putting it in a whole new primetime time slot to, brand it and really make it something that they can push every week under the label of Sunday Night Soccer. This is just really interesting to me. This has been such a transitory time for the league as they moved away from TV broadcast to streaming, which is another kind of trend that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But now being able to take your programming and spin it off in these interesting ways and try to turn it into an appointment in a way that we really haven't seen in the age of streaming yet. You know, we've had shows and events that have kind of been big deals, like one-offs. You know, Netflix does boxing, and that's something that everybody talks about, which is great. But to turn a time slot on streaming into this weekly thing that people turn into, I think that's a pretty bold move, and one that I applaud them for. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think it's going to be a big shift for fans of the league. Hopefully they don't have anything else going on Sunday nights, because it seems like they're going to be busy. But, I mean, if my favorite team gets that Sunday night slot, that's something I'm going to be excited about, going to tell people about, and, you know, maybe get a party together in a way that rather than just sitting at home by myself and watching, you could turn it into an event. And I think that's really what they're going for here.
I also think just in terms of, you know, noise and participation, if you look at other sports leagues, even the Premier League in England, there was a time where you might see a game on a Monday or a Wednesday along with a Saturday. Now it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And if you're a football fan, it literally takes over your life. So I think this is very cool and strategic in the sense that it's going to be available to all Apple TV Plus subscribers on the Sunday, which, again, as you said, appointment viewing is the thing that's already been missing since the switch from traditional, those water cooler moments. I mean, Netflix kind of has them because they do release their shows mostly in binges, but those water cooler moments last one weekend and that's it. And we talked last week about building a platform that encourages habits to build, which is something that I don't think Apple TV has done just yet in terms of the app. Of course, there's still a traditional audience out there that hasn't quite been tapped into Major League Soccer since its rebirth, I really feel like, on Apple TV and MLS Season Pass. But that's about to change.
Yeah, Apple has some really interesting integrations this season for MLS Season Pass, kind of taking it back to its roots in a lot of ways, I think. First off, T-Mobile customers can get free access to MLS Season Pass via the T-Life app. That's a returning integration that I think they may have missed last year, but it's cool to see it come back, but that's very much kind of the new way of what this whole thing is. What's really interesting to me is to see Apple partnering with Comcast to offer Xfinity customers the ability to subscribe to MLS Season Pass directly through Xfinity and to stream matches through the Xfinity Stream app. So you're not actually having to use the Apple TV app. You can actually sign up through your existing service and watch it there. And DirecTV customers will also be able to subscribe to MLS Season Pass directly through DirecTV, and they'll be watching games not through an app, but via satellite channels. DirecTV is going to be setting aside some channels for MLS games, and you'll be able to watch that way. Or either of these customers, Comcast or DirecTV, can also stream it in the Apple TV app as well. And they're going to be doing a free preview for the first weekend for both DirecTV and Comcast customers to kind of get a taste of what that's like. And on Comcast, MLS 360 is actually going to be free all season long. So that whip around show, if you're just wanting to catch the highlights, or I guess if they're probably going to be using it to kind of, whet people's appetite and get them interested in the service. But this is just really interesting to me to see the service go completely streaming for a couple of years and now see it expanding beyond the Apple TV box, beyond the Apple TV app where you could watch MLS Season Pass, and now see it going back to these more traditional ways of distributing TV and appealing to sports fans. I think it's kind of a trend that we've been seeing in streaming, is them going back to the traditional carriers and saying, hey, can we team up somehow and integrate instead of competing with each other so much? Let's see if we can work together. But I mean, watching MLS Season Pass on a satellite channel, it's just so wild to me. It's not something I'd ever conceived of. And I just want to go to someone's house who has DirecTV and try it just to say that I've done it, because I think this is going to be really interesting, but also really cool to make it available to more people.
Yeah, and I think, first off, MLB fans must be frothing at the mouth at the prospect that maybe Friday Night Baseball will do the same, after all of the complaints during that transition. But also, I just think this is an incredible opportunity for Apple and its Apple Originals to really get a new audience and get new exposure to these audiences that maybe haven't even looked at the TV app before, and just hearing about Severance and heard murmurs of Ted Lasso beforehand and the morning show. I'm really hopeful that that's what we see, is in the end, like Comcast and other platforms that are now going to have MLS Season Pass, going out of their way to promote these originals, which I think would be really, really handy. That's not a given. We have to see how the advertising structure and the agreements for this upcoming season have been cut, because it is something that has kind of been missing from MLS Season Pass. We saw it with Major League Baseball, but not really with the MLS, other than I think maybe a couple of adverts for the Instigators, if I remember correctly. So that's very cool, but I want to get back a moment to scheduled viewing and that conversation. If you look at it, on Mondays, occasionally we get a podcast episode, right? On a Wednesday, we'll get an Apple Original. On a Thursday, we normally get some kind of Apple Music concert. And on Friday, we've got our Apple Originals. Of course, on Sunday, we'll now have Major League Soccer available to all. So, any ideas on what Apple could do on Saturday to make things extra special?
I had an idea just in terms of keeping the sports theme going, Friday night baseball, Sunday night soccer. Why not Saturday night basketball? I think Saturday night football would be confusing for people because people in Europe would be tuning in for soccer, and that's on Sunday night, so we don't want to confuse people. So let's get some WNBA on Apple TV Plus on Saturday nights. I think that'd be fun. Apple kind of pokes around at different rights to see what they can get, and so far we haven't seen anything in the basketball space, but I think if they could just get a once weekly game, a couple games, maybe a doubleheader on Saturdays, yeah, I think that would be fun and kind of just finish out the weekend sports lineup on Apple TV Plus. Anyway, that's my pitch. Did you have any ideas for what they could be doing on Saturdays?
I think one thing that they should look into is possibly something that will promote some of the amazing features and integrations that are on Apple TV specifically. I think one of the things that's going to get advertised again and again and again to people that aren't watching MLS Season Pass on Apple TV is the multi-screen and the addition of up to 5 screens this upcoming season. Very, very cool. But I think on a Saturday, Apple should maybe look at a Share Play Saturday, where they pick one particular title, be it a film or a TV series, that for that day you can share play subscription free with your family or friends. And that could maybe promote a feature that we've already mentioned once in this episode, but it's a feature I'm such a fan of. So yeah, highly underused and not a lot of people talk about it, but it's there. It exists.
That could be a fun twist on what Apple did recently with the free Apple TV Plus weekend. Rather than doing the whole service, pick a title and kind of focus the attention there. I mean, and then people who, okay, I've heard about this Silo thing. Okay, maybe let me just hit play on it and watch it with my friends. And again, more ways to get people interested in the service and plugged into what Apple's doing. I think that's always the angle that they're going for. If you want to keep up with all the action on Major League Soccer all season long, MLS Season Pass is available for $14.99 per month or $99 for the season. And Apple TV Plus subscribers can sign up at a discounted rate of $12.99 a month or $79 for the season. And of course, you can follow all the action in the Apple Sports app. And don't forget about the MLS hubs in Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, and Apple Maps, which we'll link to in the show notes. It's very cool to see Apple going all out across its services for MLS Season Pass, and we encourage you to check it out.
Well, that's the positive. And no, honestly, I'm going to be positive this week, Devon, when it comes to our app talk, because we're going to talk about Macs again. This week, though, they've come up with a new layout, which is rolling out to streaming boxes, including Apple TV. And I'm very, very happy about some of these changes. They are kind of taking advantage of the left side navigation like everyone else is these days. But what this new navigation introduces is 2 new spaces that I think are amazing, and I hope to see others kind of follow, especially services like Macs that don't necessarily control all of their content because they're not all originals. Macs have introduced the What's New area, which shows the latest arrivals on Macs, but also shows what's coming soon. So you can kind of add it to they've got an in-app queue system as well, which is a bit confusing for us on Apple TV, but very cool for Warner Discovery. But it will also show you what's soon to be leaving the service, which I think is very, very handy for Mac subscribers. The other addition is categories. I mean, pretty self-explanatory, breaks down content by different themes, genres, and brands. And that is pretty much it when it comes to this new kind of redesign of Macs and its layout. Nothing's changed as far as I could tell from the video player, and some of the quips and queries that we had haven't been addressed as far as I could tell. But yeah, we'll keep eyes on Macs for as long as I'm a subscriber, but I have an update on that later on in the episode.
Another service that's now available to a new group of people is NVIDIA GeForce Now, which is now rolling out on the Apple Vision Pro. Before, it required a progressive web app to be used on Apple devices because there's no official app for it. But somehow on the Apple Vision Pro, they've got it working just in the browser now. So you don't have to have a PWA. You can just play it on Safari in Apple Vision Pro. There's over 2,000 titles in NVIDIA GeForce Now with 100 to play for free, up to 4K at 120 frames per second. I've heard really good things about the service. I've not tried it myself, but I have to say, the more I hear about game streaming, the more I feel like this is something that could be in the future for me. As someone who loves my Vision Pro and would rather use it for gaming than having to buy another console, I think this is something I definitely need to check out now that it's on there. Mark Gurman is continuing to report that Apple are on track to introduce PSVR controller support later this year. maybe with visionOS 3 at WWDC. That'd be a really cool addition to their announcement. This news also comes at a time as Apple are rolling out questionnaires about Apple One, which quickly brings us to the question of Apple Arcade and how it can be improved. Because I know you and I both filled out the survey this week, and there was a lot of questions about, okay, who in your house is using Apple Arcade? How are they using it? Even questions of like, what are your favorite games on Apple Arcade? A lot of questions about what Apple Arcade usage is like and what people like about it. So my question to you, Sigmund, is what have you been thinking about Apple Arcade? And also, is it a coincidence that we got this survey this week, or do we have a listener in the Apple Arcade team?
Yeah, I kind of answered some of these questions on the questionnaire and really kind of tried to pivot towards traditional games. I pretty much replayed what I said on the podcast last week, which was a central place in which communities can build, and also access to Xbox and EA games, traditional console games, which, as much as Apple Arcade is great and it hits a certain audience, there's a core gaming audience that do part with their money to a bigger degree, I think, that Apple should be taking advantage of, and really should be taking advantage of Microsoft and their pivot from games console manufacturer to publisher, and seeing where they can go with EA as well, who I'm sure are always looking for a new partnership. So,
yep, those are good thoughts. I approached it as a parent of a child who will be eventually playing games on an iPad or a phone. We're not there yet, and put that off as long as we can. But my biggest takeaway from Apple Arcade is it's safe. It's a place where I can get games for myself and my family, where I don't have to worry about junk. I don't have to worry about ads and privacy, and are they going to spend $300 on coins and I get a weird bill later? So to me, that safety aspect and not having to worry is my favorite part. And listeners know I'm a more casual gamer. I like the word games, the puzzle games, things like that. But I also would love to see the service lean even more heavily into indie titles and originals, and really push some unique games that we're not seeing elsewhere, in addition to the mainstream stuff, and trying to make it appeal more broadly as well.
Couldn't agree more. Talking of audiences, we have been an audience for not one, not two, but 3 trailers this past week. Complained about it last week, no trailer talk, and we get hit with 3. One of them for Goldie, a brand new animation that looks absolutely fantastic, out next Friday, so we'll be talking about that next week. A little bit further down the line is a trailer for the 2nd season of Surface, a fantastic mystery thriller that I think flew under a lot of people's radars. This 2nd season, however, is set in a whole new world, with a new chapter following Sophie as she travels to London to unravel the secrets of her past. Desperate to uncover the truth about her mother's death, Sophie must infiltrate the city's most powerful and secretive family.
Do you know what it feels like to not remember anything?
My mother died when I was very young.
How did she die?
She was murdered. I have to go back to where it all started. With you. With your family.
What do you remember about your mother?
I think the Huntleys were involved with her death.
You can't fight my family. You'll never win.
I need to find out the truth.
Once again, from Hello Sunshine, created, written and showrun by Veronica West, and starring and executive produced by Gugu Mbatha-Raw. Also starring Olivia Jackson-Cohen, Millie Brady, and new this season, Phil Dunster returns to our screens alongside Gavin Dre, Rupert Graves, Tara Fitzgerald, Nina Sasanya, Jolie Richardson, and Frida Pinto. Wow. Just a name you want to drop right at the end of that list there. Devon, what did you think of this 2nd season trailer? I feel like Surface, the 1st season, was a bit of a sleeper, right?
It definitely took its time getting into the plot, and I think that went with its premise of memory loss and trying to get yourself back into your life. But I feel like based on this trailer, this season's definitely going to pick up the pace. We've established where Sophie's at. We're starting to kind of get a little bit of details about where she's from, and we don't know a ton. She knows even less than we do, I think. But what we're getting is a change of scenery, and I think a much more rapid pace for this season. So yeah, I think that if season 1 took you some time to get into, which is totally fair, I think this second season is going to be one that will definitely grip you a little bit more quickly and move a lot faster in terms of plot and the twists and turns that we are certainly in for with this second season. So I'm excited about it. I think the new cast and the new setting looks awesome. Very much in line with the tone and the setting of season 1. It doesn't feel like a different world. But, season 1 was like the grayest portrayal of San Francisco I think I've ever seen in my life. And now we're moving to London, where I think that vibe and tone might just fit a little bit better with the scenery that we're going to be seeing. But it's also, it's high British society, so we're going to be seeing some fancy places as well. I will say I think this is going to be a big adjustment for fans of Jamie Tart. Very different role for Phil Dunster here. We didn't get a ton of him in the trailer, but I think we kind of get a vibe for what he's going to be doing this season as a part of this sinister, is that fair to say, family? Kind to your front, but then you turn your back and, let's just say Sophie probably doesn't want to be on their bad side for very long because we don't know what's going to happen to her. The other thing that really stood out to me about this trailer was the sudden reappearance of James, the world's creepiest husband. And we don't know if that was a dream sequence or a nightmare, or if that's actually him showing up in London. I spent the entire first season not knowing what was happening with him, but knowing that it couldn't possibly be good. And I'm just curious how, with this huge shift in where the show takes place and, really who Sophie is. I mean, she's going to really rediscover her true identity, not the one that was created for her after her memory loss. I just wonder how he fits in and how much more of the creepiness I can really take with the second season.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I also think this second season trailer is going to be an introduction to the series for most people that have seen the trailer now. Ahead of its debut on February 21st across all of your screens, you've got the chance right now to catch up on season 1 in all of its glory on Apple TV+. Another series that premiered its trailer this week is Berlin ER. After private life falls apart, a young doctor seeking a fresh start takes over the emergency room in Berlin's toughest, most chaotic hospital. Battling staff resistance and a rundown system, she must unite her maverick team to save lives.
Das ist unsere neue Chefärztin, Dr. Susanna Parker. Wenn's brennt, hat die Rettungsstelle 250 Patienten.
Wenn ich einmal ganz kurz Ihre Aufmerksamkeit haben dürfte, bitte.
Ich schaffe 3 Tage. Höchstens.
Willkommen im Krank, Dr. Parker.
Co-created by former emergency room physicians Samuel Jefferson and Victor Jaworski, starring Haley Louise Jones and Slavko Popodik. Devon, I've got to say, based on the synopsis and what we'd heard of this leading up to the trailer, I was expecting something a little more comedic and less dramatic than what was shown in the trailer. I think there is probably some hints at some dark humour here, and no doubt they will creep in along the way, being that it's a drama. And I kind of mentioned a couple weeks ago how I really enjoyed The Pit on Max. There is a limit to how much hospital drama I will watch in my free time, Devon. That said, this looks really cool and a different perspective, as always.
Yeah, this looks really intense, I would say. Much more dramatic than I think I was ready for going into the trailer, but there are maybe some like low-key laughs, like not make you laugh kind of thing, but just cut the tension a little bit every once in a while. I think that's probably the vibe I was getting. With medical drama, there's all kinds of different ways that genre can go. It's very popular, obviously, one that a lot of people love. Some people watch it for like the random weird cases, like learning about different diseases and stuff that you never heard about. I don't know, based on the trailer, if that's really what we're going to be getting here. This seems much more focused on the staff and the drama between the staff as the new leadership comes in, rather than on the patients as much. They seem more like the backdrop. But hey, I could be wrong. We're going into an ER that is obviously overrun, obviously understaffed, and people who are tired and, let's be honest, grumpy. This young woman comes in trying to reform things and get things back on track. I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic, like a workplace drama, but happens to be set in an ER. So, I think it's got some potential for sure. And the trailer wasn't dubbed, which I appreciated. I was a little worried about that when I hit play. I was like, what are we in for? I think the subtitles were actually burned into it, which was interesting because I also had my YouTube subtitles turned on, so I was seeing all the titles twice. I think this one certainly has the potential to be a gripping ride, and I think, again, that medical drama genre is just one that people can't get enough of. So I think it has the potential to draw an audience as well. Berlin ER debuts February 26th with its first 2 of 8 episodes on Apple TV+.
Well, following some fantastic trailers, let's talk about some in production. And I want to start with a bit of a correction from last week. I think I got people excited. And if I did, I have an apology to make. As of last week, a couple of sources have corrected us that filming for season 4 of Ted Lasso in London will now not commence until the summer months of May and June due to scheduling conflicts. We've also heard some detail about the upcoming season from a narrative point of view, with one of season 4's main storylines focusing on establishing AFC Richmond's women's team, which would make for, I think, a welcome shift in the series and the start of a new worthy storyline. We've heard all the way through the original 3 seasons of Ted Lasso that they had, a very much a 3-act storyline that they wanted to tell and that they'd completed. So I think there was always a little bit of concern as to, okay, are we going to retread old ground? And after all of this time waiting, can the return of Ted Lasso and AFC Richmond to our screens add anything more, or is it going to kind of detract from the show that we fell in love with? As I say, it looks like at least one of the main plots is going to be the introduction of AFC Richmond women's team. What are your thoughts on this one, Devon?
I like this move. I think this could be really interesting, a fresh start almost for the series, even though, it's going to be its 4th season. It feels like the end of season 3 was certainly very final. And so giving it kind of this way to not just jump back into the world that we've known, but create a new world with some of the elements that we know and love, I think that's a great way to approach it. I think there could be some really interesting interpersonal dynamics that could come here. I mean, who's going to be coaching this team and how exactly is all that going to work out? Lots of potential for some hilarious new characters in terms of the players. I mean, so many amazing players that we loved from the first 3 seasons of Ted Lasso who hopefully can make some cameos and appearances, but an opportunity to rebuild that team from scratch and really put together a fun ensemble, I think would be great. It's also another opportunity to lean into the show's themes of female empowerment, which have always been present in a lot of ways, but making that the forefront, I think, could be an awesome opportunity. So to me, if I were making a 4th season of a show that had so much success, but could become formulaic if you just try to recreate the same thing, I think this is a great way to take a new approach and do something different. And I'll just say that, we're keeping up with as much as we can the rumors of when things start, but just expect Ted Lasso to be like any rumored Apple product and just keep getting pushed back and back and back. It's just what happens with these big products like this, and as you're trying to get everybody back together. And we'll keep everyone updated as we know. We're all excited to see what's next for Ted Lasso, but I think it's going to be quite a wait that I think will hopefully be worth it in the end. But you have more of a connection with the football culture over there and, the dynamics. So what do you think about the decision to move into women's soccer for the fourth season?
Well, and I will just repeat, this is coming from two separate sources of ours, and that by no means means that AFC Richmond's men's team don't have any involvement in the fourth season. But I think where there's a positive on this is, women's football is continuously growing in popularity. There are more of my friends that have young daughters that want to play football, right? That whole kind of stigmatism of, you're a tomboy if you want to play football has pretty much dissipated, especially in England, where the international women's England team have done so well. And I just think this pivot would be really, really cool, just in the sense of I don't think it'll be as complicated to get deals done as I believe there were some complications when it came to, getting certain teams to kind of sign off on being depicted in the series. This has a potential to really kind of shine a light on footballers that I've never heard of, because I don't really follow the women's game as much as I probably should. And, then you've also got the potential for a collaboration with Richmond and QFC women's team, who are actually a very successful team in their own right, who have recently achieved 2 promotions in the last 3 years and are currently champions of the Premier Division in the Women's National League. So I think there's a lot that can not only be brought to the show, but can also be brought to those surrounding communities and to Richmond as well. I mean, they're having such a blast with their Ted Lasso shop and everything else that's surrounding that area. So I'm really, really excited for season 4, whenever it does come. But I don't know if it's going to come in 2025, Devon.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Yeah, 2025 seems like a bit of a stretch, but it'll be worth the wait whenever it does come. And in the meantime, of course, there's plenty of other Apple originals that we will get to watch, including one that we haven't talked about on the show before because this just got mentioned this week, but this really intrigued me. Ben Stiller spoke with Kara Swisher on her podcast On this week about Severance and a documentary that he's making centered around his parents, Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira. Stiller says the documentary will be an Apple original film and potentially release later this year. So that's really cool, and also an interesting way to announce your Apple original film on a podcast. But, it sounds like this is something he's been working on for quite some time, obviously a passion project, and he seems to have a great relationship with Apple, so this makes sense. If it's going to be coming potentially this year, then they're probably pretty close to being finished with it. We also have a good bit of casting news this week, which is always exciting. Starting with For All Mankind spinoff Star City, which has found its lead. House of the Dragon star Rhys Ifans has come aboard the series as chief designer, the driving force behind the Soviet space program. Star City is a series that we've heard about. It was announced, but we haven't heard a lot of movement. Of course, they're still working on season 5 of For All Mankind, so that's probably gone to the forefront, but great to see some movement with Star City, and can't wait to see this cast as it continues to assemble. Timothy Oliphant and Annette Bening have joined the cast of Apple Original limited series Lucky. The series is led by Anya Taylor-Joy and follows a young woman who is forced to embrace her dark criminal side in a desperate attempt to escape her past. So another Apple Original with just a star-studded cast coming together, of course, led by Anya Taylor-Joy, who we'll be talking about very, very soon with Apple Original film The Gorge. Mark Strong will join Callum Turner and Brianna Middleton in Apple Original sci-fi series Neuromancer, based on the novel of the same name by William Gibson. And Corey Stoll will star in Apple Original film Matchbox, alongside John Cena, Jessica Biel, Sam Richardson, and others. The plot of the film, which is directed by Sam Hargrave and written by David Coggeshall and Jonathan Tropper, is currently under wraps, but we do know it is based on Mattel's classic toy car line of the same name. So again, the stars that they're getting for these Apple Originals, very exciting. Still very interested to see where this Matchbox thing goes, how exactly that's going to come together. Is it a racing film? Is it a historical film about the toy? We don't know, but we know who's going to be involved, and that has me excited.
Some other news, not in production or casting, but if you're in these two areas, get very, very excited. That is listeners in Los Angeles and London. Members of the Severance cast and crew will be in attendance at Parley Fest, LA, March 21st to open the festival with a screening and conversation. The panel will include series creator Dan Erickson, director Ben Stiller, and stars Adam Scott, Patricia Arquette, Jen Tulloch, Daikon Luckman, and Sarah Brock. Tickets are on sale now and linked in the show notes. And for listeners in London, you have the opportunity of seeing The Gorge on the big screen in a Dolby Theatre, and if you've heard me rave about Dolby Theatres before, you know this is an experience you don't want to miss. Screening at the Dolby Theatre at London's Battersea Power Station, thanks to Apple and Den of Geek. We will have a link as to where to claim free tickets in the show notes before they're gone. But yeah, what an opportunity to see the upcoming film in a theatre.
Yeah, that's very cool. Definitely take advantage of both of those opportunities if you're nearby. As we discussed a couple of weeks ago, Silo's second season resonated strongly with us, and we don't seem to be alone in that. The series appeared on Nielsen's Top 10 streaming series chart for the week ending January 5th, coming in at number 9. It's always cool to see an Apple original series on the Nielsen Top 10. It's not too often that they crack up there. It's a very tough chart to break into, and so we always want to shout that out. According to Matt Bellany at Puck, Apple has hired Ty Warren, a former Netflix, Legendary Pictures, and DreamWorks executive, as the head of physical production for Apple TV+. Apparently, Ty came out of retirement or semi-out of retirement for this role, which is cool to see someone with such experience coming in. I didn't know that this was a role that streamers and companies had until reading this news, but apparently head of physical production, that's a pretty big deal in terms of budgeting and making plans for like where productions are going to be and when. So that's a pretty big job, and seems to be in good hands with Ty Warren at the helm.
Lastly, some awards news. UK Critics Circle have awarded the Best British Irish Performer of the Year to Saoirse Ronan for her work on both Blitz and The Outrun. Now, when it comes to awards, a lot of award contenders later on next year will have previewed some of their films this year at Sundance Film Festival, the first major film festival of 2025. And whilst I wasn't able to be there in person, I was able to watch a host of films, including Apple's upcoming original documentary, Deaf President Now, on my Apple TV, with thanks to Tails Scale and Devon's iMac back at home. Of course, being in the UK, it adds a little bit of a complexity, but I got to tell you, the effort was worth it. I love this digital element to Sundance Film Festival, and it hasn't worked out every year, but this year it did. And, well, Deaf President Now is just a really fantastic documentary. It's a collaboration between deaf actor advocate Niall DeMarco and an Inconvenient Truth director, Davis Guggenheim, who offer a compelling look on 8 days in 1988 when the students at the world's only deaf university locked down their Washington, D.C. campus, demanding the appointment of a deaf university president. It's a fascinating film, Devon, because it reunites the Gallaudet grads who organised the movement to describe events in their own words, dynamically signed on screen and spoken aloud by unseen actors. What I love about this is something that I think I talked about a little bit when we were reviewing The Pigeon Tunnel from Errol Morris and his way of making a documentary and his style of reenactments and recreation using, these high impact inserts. This time, this film uses like flashing lights and beating drums to punctuate the effects from a death perspective. And that's the other thing about this. It punctuates the death perspective in another way by occasionally having the sound mute, giving the film's deaf audience a distinct advantage over non-lip readers, which I think is brave and a really influencing choice. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, okay. It was disorientating, but I totally got the reason why it was being done. And a really brave choice. But the first time, and we've seen sign language in film a fair bit, including, of course, the Academy Award-winning Coda. But I think this is the first time really where I've noted the different styles of signing, with some in the film being more gestative with big movements, whilst others communicated within a more restrictive box. And I thought that was really, really quite incredible. I will leave it at that because we want to have a full conversation when Deaf President Now does make its streaming debut. But I will say, just for now, another brilliant documentary. Not only captivated me, but I've seen it at the top of many top 10s for Sundance Film Festival this year. Whilst it didn't necessarily take away any awards, one that's come away with high praise.
Well, that's great. I'm really glad you got to see it and enjoy the festival, and I love hearing your perspective on it. Hearing your thoughts just makes me even more excited to see this film when it does come out. We don't have a date yet, but it is finished, so it's one of those things that Apple could drop on us at any moment, and as soon as we find out when it's coming, we'll be sure to let our listeners know so we can all be talking about Deaf President Now when it makes its streaming debut on Apple TV+, presumably later this year. Now, a release that barely made it in January, so that we did get at least one immersive release this past month, was Man vs. Beast on Apple Vision Pro. We both got to enjoy it, and we thought we'd talk about it. This one follows bull handler Rooster Gilstrap and bull rider Bodie Burr as they offer insight into the world of professional bull riding as Bodie competes at the Mountain Valley Rodeo in Huber City, Utah. It's directed by Ryan Booth, with executive producers David Richards, Camilla Prokop, and Jillian Altman, and director of photography Andrew Weed, cinematographer on The Bear and 8th Grade, and line producer Alexandra Beyer, featuring once again Rooster Gilstrap and Bodie Burr offering their insights. Sigmund, just overall, what did you think about Man vs. Beast on Apple Vision Pro?
I was blown away, and I think I've said this pretty much every time we've talked about an immersive video, but this felt very different. A couple of takeaways that I'll just very quickly say. I think open spaces are where immersive video excels. As excited as I was for Submerged and that first narrative feature, there is something that I feel is completely limited when you're in a closed off space, whereas I can just look as far out as I want to, and I really feel like I'm having an experience somewhere and not in a studio. I was a little bit concerned going in. I think we joked when we previewed that we were like, oh god, is this going to make us feel sick? There are some fun visual treats here. I was surprised actually how still these 10 minutes were in a lot of settings, and the photography just out of this world. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking at immersive videos slightly differently these days because I'm gearing up to the Blackmagic's immersive cine camera. And there was one thing that I wasn't too sure if it was just a change in perspective and whether they're getting more close up to their subjects with this particular video. It didn't seem to be as large format as the videos before it. There seems to be a bit of a cut-off point, which I didn't experience as much in previous immersive videos. Is that something you noted yourself?
I did, and I honestly thought it was just me until you said something about it. But yeah, I wonder if this was edited slightly differently, or I don't know, maybe we're just getting used to the immersive format, looking around more than we used to. But yeah, I definitely found myself hitting the edges a little bit more than I was used to. Part of that too could be the different environments that the film was shot in. You mentioned the landscape, beautiful plains, just absolutely gorgeous with the sun off to the left side with the lens flare. I mean, that was just gorgeous. I think that was my favorite shot of the whole thing. Of course, you've also got the rodeo and then lots of shots of families at the fair, including some fireworks, which I thought was a really cool effect in immersive video. They also followed the family of the bull rider to the bowling alley, and that made me think maybe that could be our next big sports special on Apple Vision Pro. I would love to watch bowling in immersive video because going down the lanes like that was actually a really cool depth effect.
I hadn't even really given much credence to that. But yeah. I think what I really love about this was I could tell just in terms of the perspectives and the different shots that were being used that this just felt like the first real example of how immersive video could be used in a narrative feature, that like a traditional narrative film but with the extra immersion of immersive video. And maybe that is because I am a fan of the cinematographer's work in both The Bear and most importantly 8th Grade, which if you haven't seen that film, it's both sweet and a nightmare as well, because it's through an 8th grader's eyes as she goes through all of the things that 8th graders do. But yeah, there was just something really quite special about this. Even some of the footage in the dark, which I don't think we've seen too much of, in terms of open air, right? I think it's always been like during the day, where you can't really control the lighting as much as you'd want to. And whatever camera they're using, I was really impressed by its dynamic range. And I mean, it could have been the upcoming Blackmagic Immersive Cine with its 16 stops of dynamic range. So fingers crossed. I was also surprised by the people that it was capturing, how kind of non-put off they were by the camera. Everyone was captivated by what was happening in front of them. And I will say, as much as, a lot of people will think of America in terms of LA and New York and these big places, I've always felt an affinity with like true middle America and the traditions that come with it. And there was just something that, I don't know, I felt very at ease, I felt very at home. There wasn't really any anxiety that I'd got from all of the other experiences so far. And so it just made for a completely different experience for me, Devon. Did you have any anxiety? I mean, we need to get into the bull riding element of this, right?
There were certainly some moments that did make me jump. The rodeo is a whole world and sport that I've never immersed myself in. This whole film felt very at home for me, very real, because, I mean, we have an event exactly like this once a year in my hometown. So it almost gave me a little bit of nostalgia. But the actual rodeo side of things is not something I've experienced a ton. So yeah, watching those guys being flung around on top of those bulls and the horses, of course, I was worried for their safety, which is a big part of the whole thing. Is, the part of the reason why it's entertaining is because it is so risky. And, they talk about the different injuries that they've had. And it's like, yeah, these are powerful animals that don't want you on their back. And that's the whole thing, right? But there was one particular moment where Bodhi is riding on the bull. And of course, the camera's just right up on the bull. I'm really surprised the camera didn't get kicked at some point because it's just right there. And he comes off the bull, which, we see several times throughout the film. But then he climbs over the camera. Like, I don't even know how he had the sense of where he was to get that shot, but he literally climbs directly over it. And that actually was what made me jump the most. I was like, oh, whoa, like we're on the fence, like just sitting on the fence watching this rodeo. It was so cool. So, yeah, it definitely got me, but not in a bad way. Like I wasn't like sick to my stomach or anything. It just, the rodeo is part of the appeal of it is that danger. And you definitely get that sense here. You mentioned that it almost feels like a proof case for the narrative aspect of immersive video, and I would say I definitely agree with that. This felt like the most real immersive video to me in terms of being able to relate to it and it telling a real story with ups and downs, Whereas, sometimes the immersive videos, I mean, again, you kind of know how they're going to end because they wouldn't be filming it if something horrible happened, right? They would have scrapped that footage. In this case, you do actually get to see some failure and some struggle, along with kind of the celebration and victory as well. So it's a mix. It's not just one way or the other, which I really appreciated. But there was no first-person perspective on the bull, which I appreciated. Probably would have been good for the camera. Probably would have gotten...
Would have been good for the bull.
Yeah, definitely not. The bull would have done that for sure. Probably would have caused some motion sickness. But this did get me thinking about, what goes into the mind of bull riders, why they do what they do. And the film goes into that and kind of explains, this is how they make a living. This is a skill that they have and something they're doing to support their families going around the country doing this. But it also just made me think about the thrill of it and how people get started. And so I had a question for you, Sigmund. I know you spent some time over here at some point. I doubt they have these where you're from, but have you ever in your travels and your time ridden a mechanical bull?
I have, but not in America.
Oh.
And it wasn't a bull, it was a banana.
Okay.
When I was touring back in the day, we used to go to different after parties and whatnot, and there was one that was at a Union bar, I think, in Wolverhampton, and there was a mechanical banana in the middle of this place, and I tried, and I lasted all of 5 seconds.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not something I've tried. It's not something I'd want to try. In terms of actual bulls, it's probably showing my age because I'm pretty sure these don't exist anymore. I did see a fair few bull runs in Spain when I was growing up on holiday. So I think that's as far as I've been. I think bullfighting, I think that's banned now as well. I remember watching that on the TV in Spain as well. I'm just kind of going, wow, this is ridiculous. What I liked about this actually was also how the animals are portrayed as well, and really shown off as these majestic, intimidating figures, especially early on. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just incredible animals.
Yeah, there's a respect to the way they're portrayed, I would say, that is great to see. And also something we've talked about with other immersive videos is the introduction of them, where it's usually a close-up of the subject, very, very tight. And they innovated on that with this video by doing it with one of the bulls instead of a person, which I enjoyed and appreciated. I thought that was a great use of it.
There's even a scene, I think it's the one you're talking about with the panes in the background and the lens flare, where you're just watching and his horse is looking directly at you, and you can see the hairs sprawling out around the eye. And then it just makes a little grunt noise, and it's all very cute. But no, Man versus Beast. If you don't have an Apple Vision Pro, do go out to your local Apple store and check this out. Even if it's your 5th or 6th demo, they don't mind. But yeah, request that you get to see this. Hopefully it's available for people to check out. But 10 minutes, and I will say also, 10 minutes that flew by. Absolutely flew by. Didn't feel any discomfort, didn't feel any of the kind of things that I might have felt watching other immersive videos. I was just completely immersed.
That's what we're going for, and it was a great experience. So go check out that demo. If you have an Apple Vision Pro, load up the TV app and check out Man vs. Beast. It's for free in the TV app. Even if you don't have an Apple Vision Pro, you can take advantage of this week's Apple TV releases. There's lots happening in the world of Apple TV releases this week, starting today with the premiere of Love You to Death and new episodes of Mythic Quest and Prime Target. Thursday sees this month's Apple Arcade releases, including PGA Tour Pro Golf, Doodle Jump 2 Plus, My Dear Farm Plus, and the Kendrick Lamar Humble Synth Riders experience on Apple Vision Pro. That, of course, leading up to this weekend's Super Bowl halftime show led by Kendrick Lamar himself.
Yes, and in the build-up, we get to follow Kendrick Lamar's road to halftime with an Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show press conference hosted by Ebro Darden and Nadeska Alexis at 11 a.m. Eastern on Apple Music, with the pre-show at 10 a.m. Eastern hosted by none other than Apple Music's Zane Lowe and Eddie Francis, followed by a 4-day takeover on Apple Music Radio featuring 100 hours of exclusive programming, including the story of Kendrick Lamar in 20 songs on Apple News, a special event page presented by Shazam featuring an exclusive Apple Watch face and iPhone wallpaper, a Kendrick Lamar artist spotlight on Apple Fitness Plus, which I will be diving into this week, and a special offer for new and eligible subscribers to get Apple Music for 6 months for just $2.99. I have to say, Kendrick Lamar's story has been something that I've watched and engaged in. The last year has been absolutely stunning for him, and just last weekend he picked up a number of Grammy Awards. So this is like a continuation of a celebration of what has been a standout year in hip-hop and music and I think West Coast culture. So very, very cool. And looking forward to the halftime show. But before that, we have, of course, a new episode on Friday of Severance. Yes, I'm still setting those 2 a.m. alarms, Devon. And I will say, what I've heard is do not, and I repeat, do not check social media or anything before you see this episode.
Ooh, okay.
Some major plot lines unraveling.
Okay. We moved Mac Stories Weekly back to Fridays this past week. So I've been spending my Thursday nights editing. I think I'm going to have to figure out a way to get Severance in the schedule this Thursday night because, I was avoiding spoilers all day last Friday. And if there's even more to come this week, I think I've just got to watch it. It's not 2 a.m. for me. It's 8 p.m. So it's slightly earlier. I'm just going to have to, stay up late working on the newsletter after that once I've had my existence blown away by Severance on Friday. Then, of course, on Sunday, the road to the Super Bowl ends with the Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show featuring Kendrick Lamar with special guest SZA. The game, of course, will be between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, starting at 6:30 Eastern on Fox and Tubi in the U.S., on ITV1, Sky Sports, and DAZN in the U.K., and across multitudes of broadcasters internationally. So if you're checking out the game, be sure to check out Kendrick Lamar at the halftime show as well. I know we're going to be talking about it next week.
Can you believe it, Devon? We're not done yet because we've still got extras. Severance, the UUR book, the first 8 chapters available both in audio and in written word. And I gotta say, what an extra this is. In season 1, you can actually look for the Lumen Handbook that was made available during season 1. So this is just, adding to the mythology of the series. Of course, more Severance extras in the form of Adam Scott and Patricia Arquette. But not on Apple's YouTube channel. Oh no, on the Hot Ones Versus channel, where they're going to eat hot wings, and who knows, we may get some secrets divulged during that ordeal. I love Hot Ones.
I mean, yeah, it's a great way to get your walls down by putting your mouth on fire, right? You really learn a lot about people when they're in pain. So, that's a video definitely worth checking out and a great way to promote the show. Finally, for extras this week, we have an extra from Silo called Extending Worlds, Silos 17 and 18. This is a more than 20-minute walkthrough of the silos. Very slow and calm and meditative. I know this is the kind of thing that a lot of people enjoy, and it's a great way to get yourself into the world of Silo. The second season may be over, but it's coming back before too long, and this is a great way to jump back into that world, spend more time there as we prepare for Season 3 of Silo, which I just absolutely can't wait for.
Well, that's everything from Apple. Some TV app highlights very quickly. Movies, now available. All We Imagine as Light, about Nurse Pruba's daily life in Mumbai that takes an unexpected turn when a surprise present arrives from her estranged husband. This is a film that surprisingly wasn't submitted by India for the 97th Academy Awards, but don't be fooled. One of the year's best, nevertheless. And the same can be said for September 5th. This is a film that chronicles the Munich massacre of 1972 from the perspective of the ABC sports crew and their coverage of the events. The trailer is just absolutely captivating of this one. One to watch, and another film that has been overlooked due to, I think, a fumbled rollout by Paramount. Maybe controversial for its release time. A really, really powerful reenactment of a real-life event that asks the question, when is your story theirs? Incredible, now available in the TV app. Later this week, Piece by Piece makes its way to Peacock. This is the documentary with Lego bricks that tells the life story of singer-songwriter and record producer Pharrell Williams from his childhood in Virginia all the way to his success in the music and fashion industry. And then in terms of TV, Devon, I know you're into superheroes a lot. I don't know if this is a superhero that you've come across just yet. Invincible comes with its third season on Prime Video. This is a superhero story about a 17-year-old called Mark Grayson, who is just like any other guy his age, except that his father is Omni-Man, the most powerful superhero on the planet. And as Mark develops powers of his own, he discovers his father's legacy may not be as heroic as it seems.
This is one I've not heard of. I have not gotten into the Amazon Prime superhero stuff as much, but hearing that premise, that actually sounds very interesting. This is animated, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's very cool, and I'm going to have to add that to my list. I'm not currently subscribed to Amazon Prime, but I'm kind of building up a list of things I want to watch and jump in for, a month or two and catch up on at some point. So I'll add this to the list.
In terms of Netflix, Apple Cider Vinegar. This is an Australian limited drama following the wellness guru Bella Gibson and her friend Mila, who use their platforms to cure people whilst making a ton of money and social media likes. And there's one big lie behind the scenes, that being their cancer diagnosis. It's based on a true story, which I had actually already seen the documentary series about, I believe, also on Netflix. But yeah, this looks to be a compelling binge, and I'm very much looking forward to checking out Apple Cider Vinegar on Netflix. And lastly, for TV shows, the return of a favourite for this show, The Floor, with its third season. Devon, you recommended this to me during its season 1 run. It is about contestants who must stand their ground on a massive interactive LED game floor of squares, each representing a different trivia category. And I cannot miss an episode ever since you recommended this one to me.
Yeah, this one is so much fun. It's trivia that's very approachable and easy and fun to play with other people too. And the show must be doing really well because Fox has chosen this as their Super Bowl leadout, which I don't know when the last time that went to a game show was, but that's really cool. So this is the second season they've done this TV season. They did one in the fall, one in the spring, so it must be doing very well, and I'm excited. I can't wait to get back on the floor and play along. I won't make it my up next pick this week, though, Sigmund. I do have something else to recommend. This is another series that comes out this week, actually on Amazon Prime Video on Friday. It's called Newtopia, and it's really interesting. I watched the trailer the other day, and it just has caught my eye. It's a Korean series about a couple who break up just before a zombie apocalypse breaks out. And one partner, the guy, is in the military. They're stationed in a tower. I think they're supposed to be defending this tower from the zombies. And his girlfriend is trying to make her way to him through the zombie apocalypse as, people are just kind of falling left and right. And it looks pretty violent in the sense that, it's a zombie apocalypse. Terrible things are happening, but it's played mostly for laughs. Like, it's supposed to be like a rom-com type thing, so it's not like super dreary and dark, but it is rom-com set in the world of a zombie apocalypse, and it sounds like a fun little twist on it for me. So this is another one I'm adding to my Amazon Prime Video list, and if you're subscribed to Amazon Prime Video, check out Newtopia this Friday.
Very, very cool. Okay, I got to answer the question about my Max subscription. Have I cancelled? The truth is I haven't, and I won't be, because I came across the season 3 trailer for a show that I love, and I don't think I've mentioned ever on this podcast, so I'm about to. And that is The White Lotus, which is my recommended binge of 2 seasons. This is written by Mike White, and it follows the dark secrets and twisted truths of the guests, the staff, and the locale of a resort, which changes each season. It's supposed to be a relaxing vacation, but ends up being anything but. And there's lots of drama on both seasons, which are their own separate stories, but characters do go from one resort to the other. And yeah, lots of intrigue, lots of laughs over the course of 2 seasons, with an incredible ensemble cast, including Jennifer Coolidge, Prime Target's Lee Woodall, Aubrey Plaza, Sydney Sweeney, Murray Bartlett, Megan Fahey, and more. And I'm not going to ruin the cast for season 3, but this is a show that I've had to watch week to week to see what the next twist was and work out who did. Basically, the premise of the show is you kind of find out an incident that's just happened, and now you're going back and you're replaying and working out how we led up to this incident. And yeah, it's just so well written, so well acted. The White Lotus, 2 seasons available now, and then a 3rd season, I believe, starts Valentine's weekend. Yeah, another one for your list, available on Max. So as soon as you're done with your Succession binge, there we are.
I think that'll be it from us this week. Thanks so much to everyone for listening. We always appreciate you tuning in. And of course, we'd love to hear from you, what you're thinking, what you're watching, and what you think about the topics that we're discussing. So you can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, or you can send us an email or an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. We would love to hear from you.
We'll be back a little later next week to keep the love going with some Valentine's Day picks, a Super Bowl halftime show recap, and the premiere of Apple original film The Gorge. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.